You know, when basically every news outlet complains about the Democratic debate, it's not fair to call me biased. Even BuzzFeed News right now has an op-ed on their front page talking about how horrible and boring the Democratic debate was, saying that it was chaotic and everyone who watched it is now an aged zombie. I kid you not. And they go on to say that at a certain point, you can't stand to hear the sound of human voices. That's how bad BuzzFeed thought it was. But of course, like clockwork, a Democratic debate happens, and then everyone starts screaming Donald Trump won when he wasn't even in the debate. I get the joke, but how does that keep happening? Because they're all insane. Take a look at this story from Fox News. Trump wins debate as Democrats fight among themselves, focusing attacks on Sanders and Bloomberg. Okay, fine. It's a Fox News opinion piece. We get it. They're going to say Trump won. I bring you now to WBUR 90.9. The South Carolina Democratic debate was destined to be a disaster. A dumpster fire, they say. CBS News moderators hit over Democratic presidential debate. And you know what? Just to look at this. Just to show you it's not a handful of outlets. I just Google search debate disaster. We got criticism from the New York Times, Fox News, Mediaite. Mediaite's left, The Week magazine. Like basically everybody's saying this debate was an unmitigated disaster. And there are several reasons for it. My stars and garters. Bernie Sanders got booed several times. And you know, people on Twitter like to make it seem like, well, the only reason people are booing Bernie is because Bloomberg stacked the audience or other stupid nonsense like that. Perhaps it's because Bernie's far left and socialist policies don't fly well in certain places. Perhaps it's because South Carolina is close to Florida and there are a lot of people who know people or they themselves fled Cuba under the dictatorship that was Fidel Castro. And Bernie Sanders actually defended it, adamantly defended it. Here's the story from Real Clear Politics. But before, you know, I noticed there's a little Joe Biden right here. He doesn't deserve much of a mention, but man, the whole time during last night's debate was him pretending to be angry. And I kid you not, Joe Biden actually said that since 2007, 150 million people have died to gun violence. That is so absolutely psychotic. That's just the most insane thing. Joe Biden, look, someone asked him about North Korea, started talking about China or something like that. The dude's clearly not all there. If 150 million people had died since '07, it'd be like 40 some odd percent of the population considering population growth and new births, right? So you take into consideration all the people back then till now? No. And that was the joke I made. Did I miss the second Civil War or something where 150 million people died? No, Joe Biden's just nuts. And people in the audience are probably just like, what? But everybody on Twitter seemed to notice, left and right, Biden, you're out. Stop. But Bernie, we'll bring back to Bernie because last night, yesterday at 4 p.m., I did a segment talking about Bernie's doubling down of his defense of Fidel Castro and Venezuela and China and other dictatorships with, I kid you not, literally saying he made the trains run on time. I mean that literal in like, it's a confusing figurative stance, but typically when people mention that Mussolini made the trains run on time, it's a tongue-in-cheek comment about how we get it. Evil people, horrifying regimes do some small iotas of good, but it's only through the horrifying nature of their dictatorship. So that's a tongue-in-cheek way to say that. Bernie's literally being like, no, Cuba did good. They taught people to read. They taught people to read at like gunpoint, dude. So Bernie Sanders defends this and gets booed. And I will add, I got a couple more stories. And I really want to read you this BuzzFeed takedown. But we'll get serious first before I read you the hilarious BuzzFeed takedown of the Democratic debates. Because look, man, of all of the outlets to slam the debates, I did not expect BuzzFeed to do it. But it was kind of funny. Sanders defends Cuba remarks. Let me remind you, this is a tripling down. Bernie is refusing to back down in defending that dictatorships do something good. And you must acknowledge that. When they do something good. When they do something good. No, you don't. All right, let's read, and then I'll tear this apart again. CBS News. Senator Bernie Sanders stated that his opinion on Cuban leadership was similar to that of Obama. When dictatorships, whether it is Chinese or the Cubans, do something good, you acknowledge that. But you don't have to trade love letters with them, Sanders said at the CBS News debate in South Carolina. Asked by one of the moderators, You praised this. It's on. It's in the same thing, sir. You praised the Chinese Communist Party for lifting more people out of extreme poverty than any other country. You also have a track record of expressing sympathy for socialist governments in Cuba and Nicaragua. Can Americans trust that its democratic socialist president will not give authoritarians a free pass? And he says, I have opposed authoritarianism all over the world. I was really amazed at what Mayor Bloomberg just said that a moment ago. He said that the Chinese government is responsive to the Politburo. Who the hell is the Politburo responsive to? Who elects them? You've got a real dictatorship there. Of course you have a dictatorship in Cuba. What I said is what Obama said in terms of Cuba, that Cuba made progress on education. Yes, I think. Booing. Here's where it gets, we are entering dumpster fire territory. The audience is now booing. And I think it's fair to say it's partly because Florida and South Carolina are very close. You probably have a high concentration of the children of Cuban exiles or children of Cuban immigrants or whatever. Booing. Sanders then says, really, literacy program. Dude, when people are booing you, there was another funny moment that was really strange. And I don't know if I have the article pulled up, but yeah, actually I do. Check this out. Burning question. Was the debate audience booing Bernie Sanders for slamming billionaires or booing billionaires? They were booing Bernie Sanders. This is the weirdest thing. Even Bernie seemed confused by it. I'll come back to this. Let's figure out what Bloomberg's saying. I'm sorry, what Bernie is saying with defending Cuba. So after the booing, because people don't want to hear what Bernie has to say about why he would praise a dictatorship, Buttigieg chimes in, yes, because there's no comparing those two commentaries. Sanders, what Barack Obama said, Buttigieg chimes in. See, this is the part about why it was a disaster. I can't even read the transcript because it's just people yelling over each other with no moderators doing anything. So Sanders says great progress on education and healthcare. That was Barack Obama. And then Sanders says, excuse me, occasionally it might be a good idea to be honest about American foreign policy. And that includes the fact that America has overthrown governments all over the world in Chile and Guatemala and Iran to applause. Well, there you go, Bernie. We don't like our war in this country, though the machine does. And when dictatorships, whether it is the Chinese or the Cubans, do something good, you acknowledge that. But you don't trade love letters with them. I'm going to stop you right there. You see, when they do literacy programs or raise people out of poverty, it's because they're locking up and causing extreme physical harm and mental harm to their citizenry. Yes, people learned how to read at gunpoint. That's great. And as the joke on Twitter, there was one joke on Twitter saying, now they can read all the false charges against them when they get locked in prison for the rest of their lives for no reason. And that's what you're really defending. A literacy program in a country that had some of the highest literacy in South Central America. Well, it's Cuba. So, but in the Americas, I think what was 76% was the stat that I saw on Twitter. And you're going to defend that. Well, let's do this. I do have to point out Michael Bloomberg. I'm not sure if I have this. I do have this. Check this out. Twitter calls out Bloomberg's Freudian slip after saying he bought House Democrat seats in 2018 midterms. Look, man, there was so much about this debate that was a complete and unmitigated disaster. And you know what's funny is the past several debates have been bad. And I've made segments where I'm like, oh man, another disaster. But this was really it. I mean, Joe Biden was pretending to be angry the whole time about who knows what, chattering off about the wrong countries and claiming 150 million people are dead. Bernie Sanders is defending Cuba and communist China. Bloomberg bragging that he bought Democratic politicians. And I'm sitting here like, these are the people we have to vote for in November? Are you nuts? Is that the best they have to offer? Even BuzzFeed. So Bloomberg was bragging about the grassroots efforts he's been involved in, and then even goes on to say that he bought Democrats. He bought them. And then he tried to catch himself. I think it's fair to say that he said he almost bought. Check this out. Incredible. In the Democratic debate, billionaire Bloomberg boasted that he, quote, bought right-wing neoliberal Democrats like Nancy Pelosi. That's not true, Ben. He was talking about the moderates who won. Then after saying bought, he quickly corrected himself and said, got them. Yeah, because that changes the context, right? So here's what he says. They talk about 40 Democrats. 21 of those are people that I spent $100 million to help elect, Bloomberg said. All of the new Democrats that came in put House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in charge and gave Congress the ability to control this president. He added, I got them. You heard it first. Bloomberg is a corrupt oligarch who has been dumping obscene amounts of money to manipulate politics in this country. And he's even buying politicians. So you want to blame impeachment? It is him. If you like impeachment, there you go. It's him. So if you don't like Trump because he's a potty-mouthed billionaire with no regard to American norms or whatever you might think, then by all means, vote for the potty-mouthed billionaire with no regard to American norms. How does that work? Bloomberg is worse than Trump. He's literally buying politics. He even admits it on stage. What a dumpster fire of a trash hole that debate was. Well, now I'm going to bring you to the BuzzFeed story. When I saw this on BuzzFeed, I could not believe it. Of all of the places that would criticize this, of course, the DC Examiner, of course, Real Clear Politics would have some snippets. Of course, Fox News would say Trump wins again. But BuzzFeed? Everyone who watched the Democratic debate now looks like an aged zombie. Well, I'll tell you what, last night, while the debate's going on, me and my friends, we played some card games, and, that basically made sure that no matter what was said, we were having a good time, because everyone else who sat in their couch just to watch the debate as like their primary function, they probably look like aged zombies. BuzzFeed writes, this is amazing. Occasionally in life, you can reach a point where you can no longer tolerate the sound of human voices. That point often coincides with presidential primary debates in late February, when days seem both 68 hours long and disappear, and most people in, around, or observing campaigns develop a radiant ambient stress that never leaves. Technically, Tuesday's debate probably should have clarified something about the future of the Democratic Party between Bernie Sanders' blowout win in Nevada and South Carolina last week, and South Carolina and Super Tuesday in the next week. Instead, the whole enterprise slid into woozy exhaustion and dragged everyone watching in too. Only 144 hours separated last week's debate and this one, but even the loose anger from last week's debate seemed diminished into a burnt out end of the tour feel. Midway through an answer about what he'd do about the humanitarian crisis in Idlib, Pete Buttigieg turned and said, "I want to come back to something, and I promise it relates to international affairs." Bernie Sanders had asked him a question. He said about whether guaranteeing health care was radical. It isn't, Buttigieg said. What is a radical idea is completely eliminating all private insurance. And part of how you know it is that no industrialized country has gone that far. He and I both like to talk about Denmark, for example, but even Denmark, they have not abolished the possibility of private insurance. So this is an idea that goes further than what is acceptable in Denmark, the country, let alone imagining how that's going to fly in Denmark, South Carolina. After this healthcare Denmark line in response to a question about Syria, when Margaret Brennan turned to Elizabeth Warren, Warren appeared to have forgotten what the original question was. But the whole debate had that kind of irked alley-oop to someone who isn't their vibe. Every time they cut away from one person, the entire stage seemed frozen in the same stances. At podium, hand raised, at one point, Gayle King told Joe Biden he was a gentleman, to which he responded, "Yeah, gentlemen don't get very well treated up here." It's surreal time, where Sanders is probably headed toward the Democratic nomination, and 6 competitors don't quite know how to win themselves. Even the debate didn't know how to end. Oh man, this is really the nail in the coffin. They didn't. Check this out. O'Donnell says, "Well, thank you. That concludes our debate." King, no, we have time for one more break. Nora, one more break. Time flies when you're having fun. You're watching the Democratic debate right here on CBS. Applause, commercial break, applause. O'Donnell said, "Thank you. That concludes our debate. We want to thank the candidates, the moderators, and you watching at home tonight." They literally had to make sure they could sell ads like, "No, don't leave yet. We're going to play commercials. Don't get up. We're not done." And then as soon as it comes back, they're like, "Okay, now we're done." So this is a complete and unmitigated disaster. But let's come back to why people were booing at Bernie. This shows me whether or not you think the audience was stacked. Talk about a raging dumpster fire. Bernie, it was crazy to me when some people would say something and everyone would boo him. Like, everyone was booing everything. Nobody likes any of these people. None of them get along. Nobody wants to vote for them. Bernie's winning, but he's not lighting up new voters. So he's only winning off of a low turnout electorate that should have grown based on population growth. And it's not happening. Young voters aren't coming out, and people in South Carolina are booing him. The Democratic Party does not have any unity. You might as well not even call it a Democratic Party. At least I don't even know what to say anymore. I have people asking me like, "Tim, when you say Democrats did this, who are you referring to?" I don't know anymore. Is it the Bernie Sanders far-left progressives? Is it the dirtbag socialists who hate identity politics? Is it the establishment cronies or the moderate populist types that barely exist, if at all? They're a voice on Twitter, kind of, I guess. I don't know. I have no idea. Well, it's certainly not the moderates, let's be honest. Those people have been washed out. Is it Pelosi? I guess, for the most part. But Bernie's the front runner, and Jacobin magazine, the socialist magazine, says that it's his party. I don't even know what Democrat refers to at this point. Literally don't. But then you get the question of, let me read this for you. They say, Bernie Sanders was met with boos from the debate audience when he slammed former Mayor Mike Bloomberg's support from billionaires. But it was a little unclear at whom the boos were directed, Sanders or the billionaires. Well, I'll tell you this. Typically, when someone says something and people like it, they clap and cheer. So when Bernie says he's supported by billionaires and they go, boo, boo, it's more likely they were booing Bernie. But the reason everyone's confused is like, why would anyone boo that? There's like, 10 billionaires in this country or something? Okay, maybe more than that, but still. There's like very few of them. People don't really have a lot of sympathy for billionaires. But hey, when even Bernie is booed, I think it's because maybe they just don't like Bernie because he's a socialist. They say Sanders demanded time to respond and lit right into Bloomberg, saying Mayor Bloomberg has a solid and strong enthusiastic base of support. The problem is they're all billionaires. That line was met with loud jeers and one audience member who reacted with what can only be described as anguish. The moment caused Sanders to briefly pause. Yes, Sanders was confused. It seemed obvious. While many social media users were confused as to whether the jeers were for Sanders or Bloomberg's billionaires, there were also many who were convinced it was Sanders being jeered, judging from the temperature of the room. The latter seems more likely, but you decide, no, I think it was Bernie being booed. I really do. I can't tell you why. It makes no sense. I don't know who would burn, but I guess whatever. I was wondering if maybe South Carolina's a bunch of Republicans in there and maybe the billionaires are in there. Or maybe it's just that Bernie is a socialist. The people down there aren't socialists. It is a moderate state. You've got congressmen from, I think it was a congressman from South Carolina rejecting Sanders. And maybe they just don't, they're sick and tired of the excuses. I also think it's fair to point out, Bernie used to say, the millionaires and billionaires in this country. And then he became a millionaire, and then he was like, well, just the billionaires, because the millionaires are okay now. Well, as soon as Bernie became one, that's exactly how it played out. A dumpster fire. This is from the DC Examiner. This will be the last one, but you get it. They say the debate was hosted by CBS News. We get it. The Democratic debate was mired with candidates talking over one another, and other members of the media criticized how the moderators managed the debate. I bring this one up as a sort of the finale. Because, of course, we can see Bernie being booed. Who knows why? Bloomberg bragging about buying candidates. But even other people in media, blue checky journalists were like, wow, that was bad. And what's funny is it's not the first time they've done this. Every single debate has been a dumpster fire. Why? Why? You know what? We got the B team. The Democratic A team has been gone for a long time. It ended with Obama, and maybe it was Obama's fault, really. Look, Obama had a lot of far left policy ideas, right? He wanted universal health care in his first term, and he shifted the party dramatically towards the left faster and faster. But I don't want to put it all on him. It was this cultural change that was happening due to social media, as I often describe it. And, Barack Obama was the leader of the party at the time. Once he got out, it was almost like something happened with the launch of Facebook and the rise of intersectionality in the woke far left that just fired off the Democratic Party to the far left like a trebuchet and landed them on right off the cliff into the water, splash. And now there's nobody left. And now all you've got is a bunch of tired, haggard people covered in water, dragging themselves up the cliff, desperately yelling, vote for me, vote for me. And everyone's like, y'all are disheveled and out of it. And they're all bickering and yelling at each other. The journalists can't get their head straight. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is doing nothing. Donald Trump's tweeting about this stuff. And what happens? Once again, and I'll wrap this up. Trump wins. Trump wins because none of these people have cohesive ideas. They're eating each other alive. No one knows who the front runner is for the most part. Like we know it's Bernie, but everyone still thinks, we have a chance to win. Maybe after Super Tuesday, we'll get rid of some of these people, but I bet you they will not drop out. I'm willing to bet everyone who's in will stay. And you know why? The more people running, the more likely it is that Bernie will not break the delegate threshold to get the nomination at the DNC. So you're going to see Buttigieg and everyone hold their ground because if Bernie doesn't get the threshold, it goes to a contested convention and it's anyone's game. That's why when asked the last debate, Bernie was the only candidate who said the popular vote should be the nominee. All of the other candidates said, nope, nope, we have rules, we have a process. So let's say Warren gets nothing, but they go to a contested convention. Superdelegates chime in, everyone votes. It could be her. Why drop out then? I'm kind of bummed Andrew Yang dropped out. He shouldn't have. Because if this goes to a contested convention, they could have voted for him. I mean, whatever. I think Yang bowed out with grace, so I can respect that. But there's a bunch of other Democrats who probably won't. I think it's going to go to Bloomberg. I really do. Now, 538, I think at last check, has Bernie poised to win, but barely. And contested convention is the second highest. It's teetering back and forth. We'll see what happens after Super Tuesday in South Carolina. I'm going to make a hard bet that this debate performance by all of them, I don't think we're going to see that big voter turnout Democrats expected, because it hasn't happened yet. A lot of people were talking about New Hampshire being this great, like the numbers were projected to be higher than 2008, and then they weren't. They were just around 2016 with no new voters, very, very few new voters, very few younger voters just not coming out. Bernie was not lighting up any new voters. Nobody cares. You know why nobody cares? They got nothing to worry about. The only people who care about this are culture war people like you and me. Donald Trump the economy is great. Most people aren't paying attention. They're sitting around on their lounging chair, eating pizza, watching the game, and they're like, things have never been better. And because things have never been better, they have no reason to pay attention to anything else. When things get bad, that's when people start going to the news and saying, why is my life bad? But Trump has kept them fat and happy for 4 years. So they're sitting back, not paying attention. And the only people who are coming out are culture war people who are like, Orange man bad. But I will leave all you Trump supporters with one warning. These are primaries, and voter turnout matters. Here it does. But we had massive voter turnout in 2018. It's possible that in the past year and a half, 2 years, that people's lives have gotten so good they just don't care anymore. Or it's that, it was only fueled by Bloomberg dumping money into the races. And maybe now he still is, but now he himself is running and people are more focused on the presidency and Trump will probably win. I don't know. It could be that in the past 2 years, life has just gotten better and people are now just over it. It could be that the Democrats have done so many insane conspiracy scandals that everyone just turned the TV off and went to the sports bar to grab some wings with their buddies and say, please do not talk to me about this. I am so over it. We saw the ratings collapse for all the big political moments from, the testimonies of whoever to Kavanaugh and all that stuff. And they've slowly been falling, getting lower and lower. Now, the last debates actually, not yesterday's, but the one before that, actually had pretty good ratings. But I think that's because we're entering primary season. These might have good ratings as well because Super Tuesday is around the corner. But I'll wrap up with this. If the ratings for this debate were better than ever, the Democrats should be very, very worried. Bernie Sanders tripling down on defending authoritarian regimes is inexcusable as far as I'm concerned. Joe Biden ranting with false anger about 150 million people who have died. It just sounds crazy. Once again, Pete Buttigieg sounds like he's made of plastic and has nothing to offer. Klobuchar sounds like a nervous, she's just nervous shaking, trying to, I don't know what she has, but she sounds nervous. I'll put it that way. And you had Bloomberg, who actually admitted to buying politicians on accident. I'm forgetting someone else who was there. I don't know, whatever. So that's it. I think Steyer. That guy exists? Yeah, he paid his way and so did Bloomberg. I'll wrap it up. I think they're in trouble. I don't know, though. I will tell you. It's possible Bernie's people really do come out in droves. I just don't see it because for all the people that are talking about Bernie really lighting up the Democratic base, you have to realize most Americans are scared of socialism. And what do you think is going to happen in South Carolina? All of these people who might be familiar with, Cuban exiles, because it's right there, they're going to be like, don't do it, man. Don't vote for this guy. We'll see. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel, and I will see you all then.